Mr. Byer, on average, how long does it take do you have to wait to ensure that projects are NEPA compliant?
Simple projects like I was talking about with the resurfacing and all that, you're taking 6 to 9 months to get through that process, up to a year. The other examples I gave you, we've been at it 12 to 18 months on those two projects in just the environmental approval process. And those are talking about slivers of right-of-way around intersections that have little to no impact on species, the residents, or anything like that to put in needed safety improvements.
The courts have put a hold on the Waters of the U.S. rule, and looks like that's not going to be implemented. But under those rules, there would have been major restrictions on and new regulations on ditch water. How would that have impacted, and particularly for rural roads, the cost of building or maintaining or repairing those roads?
Well, first of all, we are very happy that the Waters of the U.S. has been stayed. That would have pretty much shut down county government in terms of being able to provide citizens the service that they need. I mean, if we have to go out there and every time we clean a ditch out, we have to go through a permit process to do that. And I know they try to say they operate under permits that are general permits, but there's still regulatory involvement there that we have to submit documentation. All that money that we're spending is less money that we're putting out there to benefit the citizens of our county.
One other thing that the EPA is doing and that the Federal Highway Administration is doing is imposing emissions rules. Excuse me. And one of the issues was the ozone rule, and it's particularly problematic for southern states. It's a big problem for us, and it could have a very negative impact on economic development. One of the problems I've got with this is they keep changing the goalpost, and it has a tremendously negative impact on planning. For instance, the EPA has proposed a new ozone rule, which frankly, we had a hearing and I questioned Administrator McCarthy about it. The technology doesn't exist at the moment to achieve this new rule. But it was also interesting that I think this was either in February or March of 2015 or 2016. I think it was 2015. I also asked her if they had, when they had sent the implementation guidelines to the states for the 2008 rule, and they had just sent them. So when you have federal agencies, EPA or any other agency imposing these rules and then not sending the implementation guidelines, that has to have a very negative impact on your ability to plan and to get investments, even private sector investments for infrastructure. Would you want to comment on that?
Yes, sir, I will. The last round of ozone requirements did not touch our metropolitan planning organization, but we were a borderline with that, and it would have had extreme impacts on the way that we were able to plan, whether it was on the transit side or whether it was on the highway side. And we were fortunate enough we didn't get impacted by them, but you're exactly right. The way that the documentation and the guidance was put out there was very problematic. It caused a lot of discernment for a year or so in the planning process as we were going through the development of our TIP. And so, yes, sir, you're exactly right. It's very problematic for that to occur.
Well, I appreciate, again, the witnesses being here and Chairman Farenthold's willingness to hold this hearing as a joint subcommittee, and I yield back.
Mr. Palmer, if I could speak very quickly on the NAAQS issue as well. Stationary sources. The Clean Air Act is one of the major drivers of regulatory costs for steel mills, and the new ozone standard has been set to a level that is near background levels. And we know, EPA has the data that there has been non-attainment in the West and in other places by virtue of emissions from
China.
My industries, competing mills in China and elsewhere. Right. And
since Mr. D'Angelo brought that up, I'll share something else with you from that hearing that we had with Administrator McCarthy. I asked her if it was true that they had just earlier that year sent the implementation guidelines to the states on the new ozone rule? And she said yes. I said, is it also true that there's an internal memo in the EPA that indicates that if we don't implement the 2015 rule, we'll be in full compliance in 10 years? And she said yes. And I take note of the fact that not only are foreign competitors dumping their steel products into the United States, they're also dumping their pollution. I yield back.
Thank you.